Zig says this: surely one of the saddest experiences in life is to hear someone say, if I could only talk, run, jump, sing, dance, think, concentrate, etc., like him or her, and the voice trails off in silence. This message is, if I just had someone else's ability, what wouldn't I do? Now, here's the gut punch. So buckle up. The answer, my friend, is you would not do a cotton picking thing with someone else's ability if you are not using the ability you already have. Comparison is where we believe that somebody has something that if we had it, we would be able to do what they're doing. And Zig is saying, absolutely.
The reality is we're always telling ourselves some type of story. Well, if you just really think through and apply some logic to it, why does it ever make sense to tell a story of scarcity, of negativity, when nothing has occurred? But that is what we deal with so much in our lives, is for some reason we are drawn to negativity. I mean, that's why the news is always negative, is because they figured out that's what sells. That's what people are drawn to. We have this natural tendency to be drawn to the negative side of circumstances and things.
Welcome to the Cashflow Legendz podcast with your hosts Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
Good morning, Nate. How are you, brother?
Good. How you doing, man?
Good. For all you out there that watched an hour later, I already knew Nate was good. We've been talking for about an hour this morning, but we just hit go live.
Yep. I'm live on my page, so you must be live on yours.
All right, so let's frame out a little bit, anybody that catches this an hour later, what our goal is with this. Nate and I talk about so many things and get around so many people that are encouraging us to grow and lean into what it means to think about how we think and invest in ourselves and all those things, Nate, that we thought it'd be a good idea to hit record on things we talk about anyway and bring value to anybody that chooses to share their most valuable resource or time with us and just get them to think about different things. So today we're going to be talking about Zig Ziglar's book, See You at the Top. We haven't decided if we're going to do it weekly or not, but just expect us to do this fairly consistently and just talk about certain topics. Sometimes it may tie to money, but really it's going to tie to mindset often, which Nate, you and I were talking about today. You can't separate those, can you?
You cannot.
You cannot separate mindset and money. You can't. It's impossible. So if you don't know who Zig Ziglar is, highly recommend you go check him out. He's got a lot of one-liners. He's full of energy when you hear him speak. Nate, has Zig Ziglar since passed, or is he still living?
Oh yeah. He's been gone for a while.
Okay. All right. So today there's a little section in his book, See You at the Top, which is called Prisoners of Hope. All right. So Nate, here's a thought for us. Some people are prisoners of fear. We've been guilty of that. And others are prisoners of habit. That's a Zig Ziglar statement. But what if we were prisoners of hope? And Nate, what if the only thing that kept us stuck is what we believed about our future? What resonates with you there? And like I say all the time when we go live, Nate, this is us learning together. We're not talking at or down or to anyone. This is things we've experienced.
Yeah, there's a speaker that talks about the stories that we make up in our head. You know the guy's name. I don't know why I can't think of it right now.
The Story Brand guy?
No. Anyways, I can't think of his name right now, but he talks about how the energy that we use to make up stories in our head about things that never happen is almost like sitting in the driveway of your car. Sitting in the driveway.
Golden.
Yeah, Myron Golden. There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. So Myron Golden when I think about this is what immediately comes to mind, is like this idea that we are, most of the time, the reason why we are stuck is because we have created a story in our mind that's not even true. And what's interesting, and I've been able to share this with other people to encourage them, is when we have a when we respond to something with information or something that happens or whatever, and we respond positively in our mind without any action being taken, just positively in our mind or negatively in our mind, if nothing has occurred yet, then both of those thoughts are just stories that we have told ourselves in that moment.
Yeah.
And so the reality is we're always telling ourselves some type of story. Well, if you just really think through and apply some logic to it, why does it ever make sense to tell a story of scarcity, of negativity, when nothing has occurred? But that is what we deal with so much in our lives, is for some reason we are drawn to negativity. I mean, that's why the news is always negative, is because they figured out that's what sells. That's what people are drawn to. So we have this natural tendency to be drawn to the negative side of circumstances and things like that.
Well, Nate, there's a line in here, and I'm going to read all of it because these are Zig's words that are so good. So when we are prisoners of circumstance, or we're prisoners of, habit, what we're really having to become aware of is that we are letting our circumstances dictate the habits we have that are keeping us imprisoned, and how we think or how we live, or both. That often is connected to comparison. Okay, so Zig says this: surely one of the saddest experiences in life is to hear someone say, if I could only talk, run, jump, sing, dance, think, concentrate, etc., like him or her, and the voice trails off in silence. This message is, if I just had someone else's ability, what wouldn't I do? Now, here's the gut punch. So buckle up. The answer, my friend, is you would not do a cotton picking thing with someone else's ability if you are not using the ability you already have. Comparison is where we believe that somebody has something that if we had it, we would be able to do what they're doing. And Zig is saying, absolutely not. You're not even honoring or cherishing or putting into place the gifts you've been given uniquely.
I think
Now,
what's
Nate,
really
good.
Now, I think what's really interesting about this idea of prisoners of hope, the immediate thought when we hear the word prisoner is something negative, but Zig is actually attaching it to, or helping people kind of think through this idea that you're really captured by something, and being captured by hope, simply means that you're thinking towards the future. Like you're a long-term thinker. You're not focused on the past. You're not drugged down with things that have occurred or whatever, but you're looking ahead. And that's biblical also, because guess who else was looking ahead? The wise men. They were waiting. They had for hundreds and hundreds of years, they had likely been told these stories of the Messiah that was coming. And so they've been looking ahead. And so, there's a ton of value when we are prisoners of hope, when we are captured by hope and not captured by our past circumstances and things like that.
Yeah, Nate, I love that. A prisoner of hope, another said what Nate just said is kind of a different way, is someone who refuses to let current circumstances have the final word. And boy, oh boy, how am I guilty of letting one circumstance dictate my thinking for the next day, week, month, year. I hate to admit that, but it happens often. So a prisoner of hope is in direct contrast okay, with a prisoner of circumstance. So here's some things that a prisoner of circumstance would say. This is just how life is. Now, Nate and I talk a lot about becoming your own banker and Nelson Nash's principles, and he talks about it is what it is in a lot of ways. It's as good as it's going to get. And we refer to that as arrival syndrome. We blame economy. We blame our upbringing. We blame the timing. We're reactively living and we're short term thinking. Now, something else Myron Golden says, Nate, as a prisoner of hope, there's always two sides. There can't be a front piece of paper without a back piece of paper. There can't be a yes without a no. There can't be a good without a bad. So here's a prisoner of hope to contrast the prisoner of circumstances. You're future focused. No, you're not thinking so much in the future. You're not living presently, but you're thinking long range. You're a long-term thinker. You act before results show up. And then you live from conviction, not conditions. What jumps out to you there, Nate? Man, it hits me in the gut from all of our conversations.
Well, it's, I think about being reactionary versus being proactive. And in order to be proactive, you definitely have to be settled in your convictions.
Ooh.
And that hits me as I say it. And I know you felt it too.
I did. Yeah. Nate, talk about our Mondays. Nate, talk about our Mondays and why we're even on here.
A few weeks ago, we went, got away to the lake for a couple of days. We do a founders retreat each year now. And one of the things that came out of that was that we were going to be very intentional about how we start our week together and have a scheduled time where we're going to get together and make sure that...
Nate, let me say this real quick.
Yeah.
Nate and I are business partners, and anybody out there that runs a business that has a business partner, you either go ahead and lean into the idea that you're going to spend a lot of time together, growing together with accountability, or you get awkward. So a lot of times when Nate and I are out in public, I'll say he's my partner, and it makes him real uncomfortable. And then I'll add business partner because a lot of the conversation is similar, right, Nate? It sounds like we're closely connected, almost like we're married. But in a lot of ways, there are some similarities when you are in a partnership that is to bring value to the world, and your convictions are to do that through what information you have. So
speaking of partnerships, this is a new book that we just started, the 25 Biblical Laws of Partnership with God. So that's something that we're going to be reading together and talking through. So you might hear us reference some of that at some point as well.
So you were talking about, Nate, this reality and this idea that accountability is built into our schedule now.
Yep.
And what value does that bring for us being prisoners of hope compared to prisoners of conviction?
We can hold ourselves accountable. We can hold one another accountable to when we are feeling that way, because by the grace of God, we have become very self-aware when we're in those moments, and also have given ourselves permission, given one another permission to call the other up when we are feeling those things and thinking that way. And you and I both experience this in our relationship where you might say something and I give you a different perspective and you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. And you do the same thing with me. Yep. And so now that we're being intentional about that, I have no doubt 2026 is going to be a lot of fun, because it's going to be the first time that we have started out our week that way.
Yeah. And we're slow, but the reality is, Nate, we've learned as business owners, and more importantly, sons of God, brothers of Jesus, and the things that we believe and live with conviction now is that we'll never arrive. There's always something new to learn and grow. And I think that's kind of the backbone of why we're doing this, is we interact with so many people behind the scenes, even people we've known forever, that ultimately when they come to us and they start visiting with us about anything they're dealing with, First of all, we're not the solution or the answer, but we know who is, always. We just happen to know information about money that creates more peace of mind and more clarity often to allow them to live on purpose with more hope because they know for sure that it's going to do what they want it to do for their purpose. So I really like a couple of thoughts here, some key things. Hope is not passive, Nate. Now, there is hope that is passive. Boy, I sure hope I win the lottery. Well, if you're playing the lottery, I guess you got a chance. But if you're not, then that's passive. But hope, when there's conviction, like you just said earlier, which I love, hope is not wishful thinking. Hope creates behavior. Hope shows up as preparation, discipline. Ooh, here's a tough one. Delayed gratification. We're always fighting that. Faithful action before clarity. Hope is the fuel. This is a Zig tie-in. Hope is the fuel that keeps people moving when motivation fades. Now, you and I talk a lot about how we've recognized a lot about how the heart is deceitful and it'll lie to us. That's scriptural. Okay. So we have to have some foundational truths that our hope is tied in. Wouldn't you agree?
For sure. And you've got to make sure that there's some real life application to as you read, as you talk through things, as you learn things. It's good to read and learn, but how do you apply those things?
Yeah.
So it's got to be practical in how we apply things, but it's got to be very personal too, because it's one thing to read what someone else is doing and try to mimic what they're doing, but if you're not playing your game, you're playing somebody else's game, then they may not bring the best result.
Yeah. Kind of what you're referring to, Nate, is, what's the cost of doing nothing? I messaged you last night because we were both kind of being Grinches. And you didn't respond, but we know each other well enough to know that we would talk about it at some point. And I jokingly said via text, because you know my humor, I was like, what's that thing they call when you do the same thing over and over again, hoping to get a different result? That's insanity. Yet we do this in our life all the time. It's this perpetual loop. So are you a prisoner of things that are hopeful, that are helping you grow and expand, or are you and I a prisoner of hopeless thinking? And those are two very different things. So here's a very important piece. If I could tell anybody that thinks that what we're saying has any truth to it, and this is Zig through and through. If you are a hopeless thinker and you think, what's the benefit of being a hopeful thinker? You have to say, as compared to what? Has your hopeless thinking been getting you where you want to go? Has it been producing results and relationships and environments that bring you up? Or has it been keeping you down? So here's a question for you, Nate, for everybody listening. If nothing externally changed for the next 12 months, because we're going into 2026 and everybody's going to have their New Year's Eve, whatever you call those things, resolutions, would your internal posture stay the same? What does that question connect for you, Nate? If nothing changed externally. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
but
I just
there's
think
also
about
the external
complacency.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because complacency can be internal, but it can also be, I think there's always something around us that we are maybe not necessarily as content as we could or should be about whatever that thing is. And sometimes it's really based on our own action as far as why that thing is why it is, the way it is.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a healthy discontentment that you can have because there is a fine line between contentment and complacency, and we've got to be very careful that we don't slip into complacency.
Yeah. I like that point, Nate. I'm just going to speak for motivated, driven providers, men that we know. There's always this line of how do I provide for my family, for my loved ones, and also be content, but be driven and motivated. Well, I can say with certainty, it starts and stops and goes through your relationship with Jesus Christ. Always. Period, point blank. And that's the most important relationship that's going to help you filter through those other things. We know that. We've tried it the other way. And I still do try it the other way. And it doesn't go very well. Okay. In the long range. So here's a couple of things that are practical, Nate. How can you become a prisoner of hope? A little spin on words. How can you become a prisoner of hope? Future language. Nate, I used to read stuff like this, get around people early in our business career and hear people say stuff like this. And it made me cringe because I didn't want to be the guy looking at myself in the mirror, saying positive affirmations and you will win the day and all these things. So I'm not going that
Still
far.
don't do that.
Still don't do that. But you and I have learned that language
We
matters.
know there's absolutely something to that.
So here's one thing. Stop saying if, start saying when. Nate, what's one of your favorite things you use?
So the thing that has brought me the most value in my life centered around this idea is whenever I am presented with information or circumstance or whatever the case may be that would ordinarily take me to a negative space, instead of saying I have to go do XYZ, I now say, when I'm in that moment of awareness, I say, I have the privilege of doing XYZ. Now, privilege forces me to define why it's a privilege. And so now I have to take it a step further and I have to really start counting my blessings, so to speak. I'm kind of forced into gratitude at that point. And something that Tim Tebow said recently that we heard is like, you can't be in comparison and in gratitude at the same time. So when you're in gratitude, guess what? There's a whole lot of light that is shining in that moment. Darkness runs when you're in gratitude.
Yeah, it's like one of those flamethrowers. Get out of here, darkness. And you just leaned into a great point of, you and I will tell men often from our own experiences, one of the best things that you can do is journal. And why is that? Because you can reflect back on things to be grateful for that you prayed through, you prayed for in your relationship with the Lord, and you get to celebrate wins. Now, you and I were reviewing something we did a year and 2 years ago, and because we wrote it down, we were able to reference it and go, wow.
Yep.
And it's never in the way that we foresaw it.
Because it's not intentional, but I guarantee everybody has experienced this where they've prayed for something or really wanted something or whatever, and it happened. And sometimes we just forget to thank the Lord, or we forget that we were even praying for that thing sometimes.
Yep.
But if we were journaling, if we were writing those things down and sort of documenting that story, then we could go back and go, oh, I forgot I prayed for that at one time,
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a ton of value in writing things down and documenting your journey.
Here's one more action step, Nate, and then we'll tidy up and let everybody get back to Christ must shopping or whatever they need to do. Do today. This is a tough one, but you never regret it. I never regret it. Do today what tomorrow's version of you will thank you for. Now, Nate, the only way that we can know we're making the decision for tomorrow's version that will thank us is to spend time getting clear on what we want tomorrow's version to be. And so we a lot of times use the framework, the 4 F's: faith, family, fitness, and finance. and you can't separate them. They're not different compartments. They all run together. As Tim Tebow said the other day that we like, he doesn't like the word balance. He likes the word tension, because they're going to always be working together, but they're not always going to be getting the same energy. Sometimes I'm going to be focused on business more than I am family.
You
But
know
if they're
what?
all
I
grounded,
just
good.
thought about it. Time under tension is where growth occurs.
Absolutely.
In the fitness world, time under tension is where growth occurs.
Yep. That's so good. And
so-
that's not just the fitness world, Nate. That's an oak tree.
Yeah.
An oak tree's root system gets stronger the more tension it experiences. A calf, I was reading a story about a baby giraffe. You know that the mother drops that baby giraffe when they birth the baby, it hits the ground. And you can imagine that being your first experience to earth. You'd be like, send me back to where I was. It was comfortable and nice and warm, and I was fed every day. And not only does that giraffe hit the ground and bounce, right after that, the mom starts kicking it until it gets up. Now you're talking about some tension right there, some friction, some discomfort. And then when it gets up on those wobbly, funky legs that only God could create as a unique thing that looks awesome, she kicks it over again. And this happens several times. But then when we know why, because that mother knows that tomorrow's version of that baby giraffe self will thank mom, because it's the only way they aren't a prey. Then it starts making sense.
On that note, as far as just thinking forward and everything like that, you mentioned earlier that we're coming up on the new year, so New Year's resolutions, all that stuff. If you don't have any goals that you've written down, here's a practical framework that you can use. Write down, a year ago I was blank, and now I am blank. And whatever you write down, the goal is a year from now to be able to look at that and go, wow, I actually had something that I was working towards for the past 12 months, and I got there. Or I'm way further along, way closer than I ever was before without having anything written down.
Yeah, Nate, this brings up a practical point that we've learned over and over again. We got a lot of this from Dan Sullivan. You first have to declare where you want to go, even if it's fuzzy and you're not sure, but it can't be so far down the road that you can't envision that possibility. And then you pick key points between then and now, and you measure how well you've done when you got there. You don't beat yourself up if you didn't do well. You reflect back and you go, I did that thing 10 more times than I did last year. Wow. And that led me to this. And Nate, you see these things said all the time. And I experience this with alcohol and giving up alcohol. You cannot fully put into words what one small change for the version of yourself you think is a better version that you're working towards can do in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And I'm not just talking about physically, I'm talking about how we use this brain and take action. Reminded me of something, Nate. Nate, did you know that the brain, which makes up less than 2% of the total body weight-wise on average, needs 20% of our daily caloric intake to run?
Yeah, I don't doubt that. So I started back earlier this year. I started working with a health coach, and she ran me through some different tests and everything like that. And one of the things she came back and told me was like, she said, "When do you eat?" And I was just like, well, I mean, like, I don't get hungry very often, so I just kind of eat when I know I need to eat, whatever. And she said, your brain is operating mostly off of adrenaline. And she's like, you got to start feeding it nutrients. And
interestingly enough, Nate, knowing you as well as I do, you also operate a lot off of momentum and hype.
Yeah.
Which is adrenaline.
Yeah. But being the quick start that I am, when I hear that and I believe it, I take action pretty quick.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So I'm good about taking action on something quickly, but sustainability, follow through, and everything like that is where I need accountability.
Yep. All right, Nate, let's close it up on a couple of thoughts. So here's a thought for everybody that's listening or listens later. We may not control where we are right now. That may be true. Something may have happened. Something may have happened to us. We may have experienced something that we couldn't control. That's going to always be the case. But what we are absolutely in control of is believing where we're going. If we don't believe, hope that we're going somewhere, then we are going to stay where we are and always be a victim of that environment or that circumstance or a prisoner of that. So, Nate, action step. One of the best things we've found to get yourself out of a funk is to quit thinking about yourself and start looking to be selfless and serve somebody or something or someone else, which is counterproductive to what the world teaches us about do what makes you feel good for you. Look
Yeah,
for a way to serve.
Jim Rohn, he and Ziglar were very similar in what they did. You know, motivation, business philosophy, all that stuff. And you know, he would talk about, hey, if you're in a pit, go find somebody else is in a pit and help them out of the pit, and you know you'll help yourself out too. And so there's something very powerful about enlightened self-interest, and when we focus on others, we kind of forget about ourselves. And one thing that, especially this time of year, it's very, very easy to just get caught up in your feelings and caught up in your emotions and caught up in your head, because I'm guilty of it too. But when you're having a bad day, someone else out there is just praying for a day like yours.
Mm. Mm.
So it's important to keep perspective.
All right, Nate. So here's the call to action for everybody listening. So most of these are probably going to go on our podcast, Cashflow Legendz. Brock is on those with us a lot also. So definitely go over there and check that out if you want to later on. But we all experience these things. So what would we do differently? Here's our call to action. Anybody listening right now? If we truly believed our best days were ahead. Because the reality is whatever we believe, we feed. Now you can be bothered by that, but like Jim Rohn said, we wouldn't do a cotton picking thing with somebody else's ability if we haven't done with our ability what God's given us. So we first got to get clear on that. And this is where my encouragement is going into Christmas, where it's about Christ more than anything. First, understanding that we are uniquely and wonderfully made in His image with gifts that He's given us for His kingdom to be a part of the body of Christ if we know Him as our Lord and Savior. And it is unique to you for His glory. And that goes back to the very beginning, Nate, where you were talking about when we have hope, it creates clarity because there's conviction, or there's conviction that leads to clarity. So if you don't have that, let's talk about that first, because that's from Jesus, and we'd love to just answer any questions you have. If you do have that and you're on the downslide or you're in a pit, so to speak, look who else you can help around you to get out of the pit. But what would you do differently if you truly believed that your best days were ahead? Nate, I know that I would be more hopeful. I would look to help others more often, and I would give you crap even more often than I already do because of love and accountability, because it's never a downside when we try to bring each other up.
Yeah, I think about something Darren Hardy said one time was chase your purpose down with unbridled pursuit. And knowing that you're having a belief and having a confidence that your best days are ahead, then one of the most important things that you can do on this earth is lean into your purpose, what you were created for. And I think that's like leaning into your purpose and understanding that, our belief that our ultimate purpose is to know God and make him known. And then to share that with other people. But leaning into your purpose is where you're going to find hope in what you're doing.
Absolutely. All right. We hope this was a blessing to you. It always is for Nate and I to get to share what motivates us, what encourages us, the experiences we've had over the 8 years as a business owner, running our company Unlimited Life Concepts, and getting to share it on Cashflow Legendz, our podcast. But like we say always, Nate, it ain't about the money. The money is something that we're dealing with, but it's about purpose and about clarity and about moving towards something that's beyond our full understanding, but it's for something that matters the most. So, Nate, until the next one, we hope everybody enjoys this. It's a privilege to be able to share our time with you. And thanks for taking time to visit with us.